welcome to episode 56 of my Doll's House Diary. Now in today's episode I'm going to be moving away from the entrance hall and landing areas and heading back up into the craft room where I'm going to be making lots more bits and pieces to fill the desk and the unit. Now I always forget to say this, but if you do like this video then please do give it a thumbs up, as that will help other people to find it. And also if you're not a subscriber then please do hit the subscribe button as well, and if you want to be notified whenever I upload a new video then hit the notification bell as well. Okay, so let's get started. So I've brought 3 of the units through into my craft room and I want to sort of start making some more bits and pieces for these and try and fill them all up a little bit more. But I just want to show you something else that I found, and it was this little shelf unit. It's got a little opening drawer there, and I think I originally made this for another one of my sheds and then I never used it, but I thought it would look really good in the craft room and I thought it would look nice just sitting on that unit. And this one, if you remember, just goes underneath the slope of the roof, and I've tried that into place and that does still fit with that sitting on there, but obviously it's the wrong colour. So I'm going to start today by giving that a coat of white paint, and then we'll start making lots of little bits and pieces. Okay, so I've just given these pieces a gentle sand and then removed the dust using my soft brush. And I'll have to do a couple of coats and possibly even 3 to completely cover this blue. But having said that, I don't really mind if you can see the sort of undercoat coming through on sort of pieces like this. Make it look sort of slightly aged. And you can see just that first sort of thin coat is still showing the blue, so I will need to do several coats. I was quite pleased when I found that because I thought it would go perfect in there. I'm sort of being quite naughty with the drawer, so I'm only going to do the front because it's such a small drawer. It's not something that I would have open or anything. I'll have it all closed on there. Just don't tell anybody. Okay, so that's 1 coat on both of those pieces, and that is going to need 2 or 3, possibly more, but we'll see. I'll apply another coat when that's dry and we'll have another look at it. And whilst that's drying, I want to make a 12th scale craft knife, the same as my Swan Morton, to go on the cutting mat here. So I'm just going to start by actually measuring the knife. And whenever you're scaling down, obviously this is where you want to start. So I'm going to go from the longest point, and that is 120 millimeters. So that's easy, that's 10 millimeters if you divide that by 12, 1 centimeter. And then if you look at the width, that is about 13 millimeters. So that would actually be just over a millimetre. So we'll do it about 1.25 millimetres, and then the depth is about 7 millimetres. So we're looking at about half a millimetre. Now I haven't got sheet half a millimetre thick, so I'm using my 0.8 millimetre thick sheet wood, which is the thinnest I have. And I actually want to use 2 pieces so that I can sandwich a blade using some foil in between the 2 pieces. Okay, so let's just make a start and cut 2 pieces, 1 millimetre by 10 millimetre. Okay, so I've actually cut 2 sets of handles, initially because then if you make a mistake or if one cracks or something you've got another one, but if they both come out okay then I'll have 1 on the desk and 1 in the little pen pot. So if you have a look at your knife, we've got that slanted end, so I'm going to cut that now. And I'm just doing all of this by eye. I think at this size it's, you know, you're talking about tiny little measurements. So I'm just cutting a little tiny angle at the end there. And then what I'll actually do is lay that on top of that one. You'll have to excuse my fingers in this video. If I'm in your way, I apologise, but I need to sort of get in and hold on to it. And then cut that like that, so you get sort of 2 similar ends, but otherwise just do it by eye. We can always sort of sand to get them to match. And then do the same with your other set if you're doing 2 as well.
Okay, so what I want to do now is just round over the other end of the handle, and that's for that rounded part there. So I'm going to start just by cutting off the corners, which will make it easier, and then we'll go in with a little bit of sandpaper. So just cut off the very, very corner like that, sort of trying to angle it as you do it. Like that. Not sure if that's even focusing in that close. And then holding on to that as high up as you can, then just go in with your sandpaper. And I'm using a piece of 500 grade, and it's quite well worn as well, so it's nice and soft. Just to round that off like that. Now, because of the thickness of wood that we're using and because of the width, I'm not even going to attempt to make the little hole in there. Even if you used a little pin head, you're still likely to split the wood. So whether you give that a go or not is up to you, but I'm not going to try and do that, because I've sort of tried to do things like that before and put all those little tiny details in, and then you just end up sort of splitting the wood. So do that with each of your handles. Okay, so we're now going to paint the pieces, and we obviously only need to paint them on one side and along the edges. So I've just secured a piece of masking tape here to a painting sheet, and then I'm just going to lay them on so they're just touching the tape. You don't want to put the whole thing on the tape, or you'll have problems peeling it off once the paint is on. So just put them on there and far enough away that you'll be able to get your paintbrush down each side. And then for these, I'm going to be using an acrylic paint, and I've got this one here, which I think is almost an exact match to the blue, but obviously you can paint yours whatever colour you like. So I've just dispensed a tiny little amount of the acrylic there, and that's probably too much as well for what we've got to do. And then I've just got one of my smaller brushes here. So I'm pleased to have found that colour that matches so well. For some reason I never got around to making a craft knife for my craft shed. In fact, I might use one of these in there, I'll see. So I'm getting that alongside the edge of the wood as well. So I've just removed the tape from the card there and stuck that to my desk, so they're now drying. And whilst they're drying, I've just printed off my sheet of labels. Now, when I did the craft shed, I saved some of the labels, but not all of them, and they were all in different places on my computer and in different files and things. So I've just sort of spent a couple of hours sort of putting them all into the one file and then putting them all onto the one sheet, which makes it so much easier. And then I've just printed that off using the best quality setting on my printer. So I'm just sort of starting to cut them out, and I've got, as you can see, lots of different things here. I've got my hobnobs there, which are my favourite biscuits, and I like to have like little personal things like that in the rooms. I've got pastels and pencils. I've got an Alpen box cover there, and I cut up boxes and cereal boxes and things for my card that I use for my glue. So I'll cut those into little bits in a moment, and I'll put those in the desk tidy. And I've got some wax, more glue, polyfiller, crayons, varnishes, paints, wood dyes, just lots of different labels there. And you probably saw me making a lot of them up into the actual product in the Craft Shed series. But I'll show you a few things, and basically I just use little scraps of wood, and I will then paint the tops and bottoms, wrap the labels around, and then make sort of separate little lids using cocktail sticks or pieces of dowel and things like that. And they're actually a lot of fun to make up and sort of turn them into, you know, tins and cans and pots and things like that. Got another colour chart there, some wet wipes, and then this that I've just cut out here is the sort of Quality Street tin label, so that's a tin of chocolates, and then I'm going to make that into a little box, and I'll put some pieces of scrap wood in there which I'll have on the desk. And then I've got a spare craft mat which I'm going to tuck down beside the desk, because I always have a spare one beside my real size desk. packet of sandpaper there and another biscuit tin cover, which I can just use to get a little bit of height. So it's all things like that. Little calendar base there with this month's date on it. And that's then a good reminder of when you actually did these things, when you were working in the room. Surgical blade box there, so I've just actually copied the real sized box, including all of the little flaps, and then you just cut those out and make them into the box. So that's always a good thing to do if you have an empty box. Just scan it in if you have a scanner and scale it down. But I've also done a video on making things into 12 scale and printing them off. And I'll try to remember to link to that at the end of this video. And it was a food labels one, but obviously you use the same method to create any sort of label. Okay, so I'm going to carry on cutting these out now. Okay, so I've made a start cutting out quite a few of the labels, not all of them yet, but I just wanted to show you what I'm doing as I'm going along. So I've got two sizes of cutting mat here, and I've got two of each because obviously cutting mats are double-sided. So what I'm going to start by doing is sticking them onto this piece of card, and then when the glue is dry, I trim around the card and then stick the backing on. And that way you can be sure that they're square. And I've obviously got one of these sitting on the work desk, but I always, like I said earlier, have one sort of tucked away beside my desk. And these are really good little sort of space fillers. And I'll have this sitting beside the desk and in between those sort of two units there, so the desk and the little cupboard there. I'm just using a grey piece of card. It's a packet, so there's a picture on the other side, but as long as you can see that grey along the centre, it doesn't matter what's on it. There. And you don't have to worry about getting glue on these, because if you're anything like me, your real sized cutting mat is covered in glue and paint and marks. Right, so I'll pop that to one side to dry. We'll cut them out and then put the backings on. So what I've got here next is sort of two parts of a sandpaper packet, and then the sandpaper goes in the centre. So if you cut a piece of sandpaper and just stick the first part of the label to one end of it, and then wrap that around the back, and then this bit goes at the top there. And again, this is something you can, I was going to do it the wrong way around then, lay or stand on your desk or have tucked away again. Again, I'm just going to move that up a bit. I've got my fold in the wrong place there. Like that. Just pop that over there. And then what I've done here is photocopy an open page of my cutting list book. I've then cut some more pages to go behind that, and then a cover just from black card, which is just slightly larger than the pages. So I'm going to stick all of these pages in separately, sorry. And I like to just put a bit of glue in the centre, and then you get sort of ruffled pages, and you can curl up the corners and things like that. Just put a little bit of glue down what would be the spine there. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue at the side of this top one as well. And then lay that on. And then you can sort of curl over the pages. Fold and then fold back and things like that. Make it look sort of well thumbed. You know, and this is obviously optional. You know I like things to look sort of used and a little bit worn. But if you like things to look nice and neat, then, you know, you don't have to do this. Just fold that one up. I'll sort of fold it as well. Make it look even more battered. And I'm just going to go and find a little bit of ribbon for that. So I've just cut a little bit of ribbon there, and I've trimmed it in half as well so it doesn't look too thick. And I'm just going to stick that over the back of the book and then just have that hanging over the page there. A cocktail stick. Put a little bit on the back of the ribbon. Fold that over. A little bit there as well. Glue that down. At an angle there. And then I'm just going to finish that off with a little neon sticky marker. So I'm going to just pop at the edge of the page there. Like that. So I've also printed off the Alpen packet cover here, and I always sort of cut these into little squares and use them for my glue. So I'm going to cut these small enough now to fit into one of the little slots on the desk tidy there, and then just sort of stand them in there. So I've just stuck a few of those together, and I've dripped a little bit of glue into that little tray there. I'm going to just stick those in there, and then I just want to stick another couple of on at a bit of an angle at the front there. So let me find some smaller ones here. So I'll just pop one in there like that, slightly angled, and then I'll do another one this way as well, like that. And if you remember, I didn't actually put any bottoms on these straws that make up the desk tidy, so I'm sticking that directly to the wood of the desk, so you can just use your normal glue for that. And then what I'm going to do is glue just one piece over here, like that, and then just dot a little bit of glue on top. And then I'll add a cocktail stick to that in a little bit. So I'm just going to start gluing some of these other little bits into place, otherwise I'm going to be sort of surrounded with bits and then have to glue them all in at once. So I'll start with the masking tape, which I'll put over here to the right. Just pop that on there. And then I just sort of wanted to stand the blue on there as well, again just to add a little bit of height and add in a little bit more colour, because the masking tape is a little bit lost on the white desk. I'll just sort of overlap that one there like that. And then my sandpaper packet here, I'm going to glue at the back there, at the back of the kitchen towel, and that will actually be leant against the wall behind the desk. So let me turn that around, and then I can just put a bit of glue onto the back of that magazine file. And I'll just dot a little bit onto the back of the kitchen towel as well. Stand that on there, and I've just been and checked as well, and it does sort of fit quite nicely when the desk's back in place. press that into place there. And have a look from the front. That looks nice, that's building up nicely in that corner now. So I've just put a little tiny piece of rubber into the other little slot there, and I put a bit of pencil on there to make it look used. And then I've glued some sandpaper here to the cutting mat. I've also backed those other cutting mats, so they're now ready to sort of tuck in down beside the unit once they're back in place. I've also got here a bottle of fabric glue which I made before, and I just put that in on another shelf, but I might have that on the desk. And I've also just done a little box of blades. So I've printed off the label on the sheet, and then I just actually cut that out and fold it all around a piece of wood, just as the box would be folded, so you tuck in the flaps and everything, and that way you've got a box with all the sides. Now whether you use wood or a little piece of card or something, that's up to you. Card is obviously easier to cut, but just make sure you get it nice and square. So I'm not sure where I'm going to have those yet, but I'll just pop them there for now. And then my little cutting list book, I'd normally have that laid on the desk beside me, but I haven't got a lot of room for it there. So I think I may have that propped up at the back as well. Perhaps not there, but maybe against the wall once I put the desk back into place. So I'll have a play around with the positioning of that. And then what I've got here is the Quality Street Tin label, and I've just sort of backed that onto a piece of card just to make it a little bit firmer. So when I made the one in my craft shed, if I just show you, I just actually wrapped the paper around a sort of base, and the top of the paper looks a little bit flimsy. So I thought it would be better to wrap it around a bit of card and give that make that a little bit more sturdy. So I've done that there, and then for the base I've just drawn two 18mm circles, or just under 3/4 of an inch there, onto a slightly thicker piece of card. So I'll cut those out, stick them together, and then I can wrap that around and fill that with tiny little bits of wood which I can sit on the back of the desk there. I've also cut just from some pieces of 2.5mm sheet wood, just some little squares which I can paint and put some glue labels on. So I've just got a 6x5 there and a 7x6 to fit the labels that I've got. And I've also cut some squares, I've cut 7 of these as bases for the wood dye labels. So what I'm going to do is put a bit of silver paint on the top and bottom, which will act like the sort of metal top and bottom of the tin, and then I can make some lids and things like that for the wood dye tins and also the glue bottles. And then with the glue bottles I'll do them the same as I did in the little craft shed there, if you can see those just standing back there. And I use a little piece of cocktail stick just to make that little pointed lid, and I think that looks really nice, so I'll do that on these as well. So I've got a little mug here which I've put a water slide transfer on, and I've just put a little bit of tacky wax in the bottom, and now I'm cutting some strip wood. So I've cut some pieces of 0.8 that are 1 inch long, 25mm, and then I'm just cutting sort of various lengths and thicknesses of strip here, which I'll then sort of put into the cup. So you don't want to go too thick with them. I think the thickest one I've got is 6mm, so that would sort of just be 1/2 millimetre. So some of these are slightly thicker. But don't make them too thick, as they'll look a little bit out of scale. And normally I'd have these hidden away in a cupboard, but I just think things like this look really nice on a desk. It gives you all those sort of, shapes and textures and things. And I like using mugs for things as well, because you don't always necessarily buy a special little pot to put things in, do you? You might use a sort of oversized mug or an old soup mug or something that you've got. That one's a bit flimsy at the end, so I'll just trim that off and have that as a slightly shorter one. So there's my little sweet tin filled with scrap wood. And I just sort of stuck a load into the base, and then you can stick all of these in individually on top until you've filled it as much as you like. And then over here I've made another little biscuit tin. So I just wrapped a label around 2 pieces of balsa wood, stuck on top of each other, and then made a little lid just covered in the paper. That's the little blades there. And then I found some little books that I'd covered before, so I'll have those sort of standing at the side there with a spare kitchen towel. And I think I'll have the strip wood on this desk because it looked a little bit too large over here, sort of overshadowed the other bits on there. And what I actually want to do now is go back to our craft knife, and I've actually been thinking about this. Rather than gluing the 2 pieces together and having the blade sort of sandwiched in between, as it's just going to be laying on a desk, I'm actually just going to stick the blade onto the back of the knife handle, and then we can just lay that onto the cutting mat, and that will look a lot thinner and a lot more to scale. And for the blade of the knife, I'm actually using this bit of aluminium that I took off the side of a cling film box. You know, where you get sort of cling film or baking parchment and things like that, and it has these sort of blades on the side of the box. So I've just carefully peeled that off of the box, and I always just keep that in my bits drawer. But it is quite sharp, so just be really careful when you're doing that. And then I've just cut a tiny slither from it, which I'm going to glue at the back of the knife. So there's my knife there, and the blade will stick to the angled part. So I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of glue on the back there, and then stick that down onto that bit of foil. And I've sort of made it longer than I need it, and then I'll trim it. So stick that on like that, and then give it a good press down. So once you've let that dry off a little bit, then you can trim the blade into a point. So hold on to the knife as you do that, sort of press down on the blade. I'm going to go across like that. And then I said about not making a hole in the handle, but I am just going to make a little mark with my scribe tool. So I'm not going to try and go all the way through because then the wood will split. But I'm just going to put a little dot there at the end. So be really gentle. Just give the little indication of a hole in there. And then just as a little finishing touch, I'm going to use a cocktail stick just to put on a little white dot for where the handle would go. So let me just hold on to the top of it. And this is the part that pushes up the blade. It is actually quite low down on the handle. So I'm just going to go like that. Probably being a bit too gentle as the paint isn't coming off. Let me just tidy that up with the other end of the cocktail stick. And then what you can actually do is come in with your craft knife and use the back of the blade just to make some little indentations in there. So don't press too hard. Do some little lines going across like that. Okay, and I'm just going to finish by gluing that into place on the cutting mat there. That'll press down. There. And I also made a little craft knife for my craft shed as well, which I've glued into place there. And I think that just finishes off that cutting mat scene. But unfortunately, as is usually the case, I've run out of time for today. So I'm going to have to leave it there so that I can get this video edited and actually on this afternoon. But what I want to do now is go and just pop the desk and the little side unit back into place in the doll's house. Okay, so there's the desk and the little unit back in place. And I didn't actually make anything for the one along the back today. But I have got that little shelf that I want to give another couple of coats of paint, and that's going to look really good standing on there. So lots more little bits and pieces to make, But I'm really pleased with how that's filling up. And I really like the thing sort of stacked at the back as well against the wall. I like everything to look really full, as you know. So in the next episode, I'd like to get back into the landing and entrance hall area and get the wooden fittings in place and the understairs cupboard. Although I may do a lot of that off camera because it's all things that I've done before in the Doll's House Diary videos. And then maybe we'll have another furniture tutorial just to sort of break things up a little bit. But that's it for the craft room for now, but I will come back to it as soon as I can.
Okay, so that's it for today, and I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Now, if you do enjoy my content and you would like to support me, I'd like to invite you to join me over on my Patreon channel, where for less than the price of a cup of coffee a month, you get 3 monthly videos, a monthly vlog where I talk about all things relating to the Doll's House and miniatures hobby, a monthly series where I'm currently turning a Mount-filled doll's house into a 1940s family home, and a 1/12 scale furniture tutorial. Now, there is an offer. If you sign up for a year, you get 10% off your membership fee, but you don't have to sign up for a year or any given amount of time. You can just pop over there for 1 month and take a look at what's over there. And once you join, you unlock over 100 videos, and even your 1 monthly membership would be greatly appreciated. So I do hope you'll pop over and take a look. But that really is it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.